the meeting minutes for the August 16th meeting. Are there any corrections, additions, deletions? Move approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. All right, so, insurance renewal. That's always a fun topic.
It is, especially after Hurricane Irma. Actually, today I'm going to have Diane Randall. She is our manager of risk. She is also the manager is being shared with Hart to go over the multi-line insurance program. I'll take it away, Diane. Good
Okay.
morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Diane Randall, and I have with me today Michelle Martin. She is our broker with PREA. I was anticipating you might have some questions, so I called him back up for today. So, what we're here to discuss today is recommending approval of PSTA's multi-line premiums for 2018 and at a total cost and 2019 at a total cost not to exceed $1.4 million for the preferred government insurance trust policies and the National Flood Insurance Program policy. This is an annual review that we do. Every year we look at all of our policies with PREA and determine what's our best course of action. For this year, our self-insured retentions are remaining at $100,000 for the liability exposures and $250,000 for workers' compensation exposures. And I will tell you that those are, especially the liability deductible, is probably one of the lowest in the entire public entity arena. And we have been able to maintain that where they continue to offer that for us. We have the premiums for 2018 for the current proposal that's on the table will be $663,472, and this is within our fiscal 2018 budget. We will also have flood policies that renew in February, March, and May, and we are anticipating some increased premiums with those as a result of the very active hurricane season we've had this year. As of right now, they are approximately $22,000 for the 4 policies that we have. Unfortunately, I'm anticipating that they could increase as much as 30% with the storm issues. And the National Flood Insurance Program is also up for renewal this year, so that will have an impact as well.
Are those numbers in the 663 now, or are they separate?
They are in the 663.
Okay.
I
How much?
included.
Well, I'm sure it's in here. I just haven't had a chance to
That's
look
right.
at the details. So, how much is the flood insurance premium?
For the 4 policies, it's $22,000.
Okay. So 30% increase would be about
From
6.
that, yeah.
Okay.
And I, that's just a
I understand.
educated guess.
Yeah.
It actually could be more. I'm hoping not, but it could be.
Thank you.
Some of the positives that we have this year is Preferred is offering us a 2-year fixed rate policy option, which we really need to take advantage of, because what that means is that our rates for the policy for property for 2019 will not go up. As a result of all of the active hurricane, it's very likely that property rates will increase over the next year. I did ask a question about what happened after Katrina, just to kind of have a ballpark, and they were about 100% increase after a major event. So we're dodging that extending that extra year to keep the same rates.
Would that be available in flood too, or just the?
That's just on the property. The flood is our separate policies.
It's federal government, so
Yeah.
we can't really control what happens with NFIPs.
Wish we could. Okay. We also pay on an annual basis a workers' compensation self-insured assessment. We're anticipating it'll be this year for 2018 of $25,000. Every insurance carrier pays an assessment to the government, and when you're self-insured, they turn that into a self-insured assessment, so that everybody gets charged for having insurance or providing coverage within the state of Florida. We are very pleased to have some increased coverages this year on our standard policies. The cyber liability on the preferred policy increased to a limit of $2 million for no additional premium, and that is in excess of our regular cyber policy that we have.
How much is it now?
I'm sorry?
How much is it now?
It's $1 million,
Okay.
so it doubled. It doubled. So that would be in excess of the $1 million that we have with our cyber liability policy that's separate, so that gives us $3 million in coverage. We also have increased limits on the package policy for earth movement, which is sudden accidental shifting, which is earthquake. It's not settling, it's actual earth movement. That actually is a new coverage, and that one is $1 million, and that's something they added to their policy this year. We have additional expense that increased from $500,000 to $1 million at no additional premium. We had business income that increased from $200,000 to $500,000 at no additional premium, and demolition and increased construction costs that increased from $500,000 to $1 million. What increased construction costs is if we had damage to a building and there were new building codes that caused the cost of the repairs to be higher than normal, that would kick in to help pay for that. Then we also had some increased limits on our crime policy. For employee dishonesty, we went from $250,000 to $500,000 at no additional premium. The computer fraud went from $250,000 to $500,000, and the forgery and alterations went from $250,000 to $500,000. So we're getting more coverage without additional premium this year. So it's our recommendation that we approve all of the policies as outlined for 2018 and the renewal of the 2019 PIDGET policies for the fixed rates at the 2018 rates.
Okay, questions? Yeah, Commissioner
First of all, it
Evers?
sounds like you guys did a great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
For that. Real quick, I'm just curious on the self-insurance retention of $100,000 for a liability exposure, to be able to do that, that's great. What is it, like if you went from 100 to, I'm just making a number, $200,000 liability exposure, how does that change a rate? I mean, I'm trying to get an idea, like how much will that bump our coverage for that?
Michelle will take care of it.
Okay. So the proposed premium for the fiscal 17-18 is $48,936
For the 100,000?
for the 100,000.
Okay.
So you would get some credit, but
Not much, okay.
the next step up would probably be 150,000. So you take a $50,000 risk for not a lot of savings on the
That makes no
premium.
sense.
Per claim.
Yeah.
And it's per
That's
claim.
per
Yeah.
claim.
Yeah, thank you, appreciate that.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the liability exposure, that's not on the auto side, right?
Yes.
So it is, that's
Well,
not
that's the general, I'm sorry, I gave the number for the general liability. The auto liability premium is $162,000.
Okay.
So, but again, so general liability would just be more of your, well, there's a lot of coverages, but general slip and
Right.
fall type exposures
Right.
at your facilities.
Okay.
162,000 for the auto, you would get some credit, but again, the risk
And that's where,
versus return.
that's where our most exposure is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the presentation. A couple of questions. I see that we have a line of coverage called inland marine, and I'm wondering what inland marine is.
I'll tackle that one. This is an antiquated term in the insurance industry, and it refers specifically to items that are not set in place. So it's mobile equipment.
The computers, like the equipment over in the maintenance building that's not actually attached to the floor, the walls, those kind of things are all covered under the inland marine.
We have
So
a,
it's kind of personal property rather than real property in buildings.
well, I'll give you a couple of examples. So specifically here, this artwork that's in the lobby,
Mhm.
that is inland marine.
Okay.
Again, for whatever reason, this is the way our industry classifies it. That's a fine art. We classify that as a fine art. That's inland marine. There's we've got servers on there. We've got radio equipment. We've got transit fare media, security surveillance equipment. So just things that are electronic in nature or things that move.
Yeah, okay. And then, are we covered by sovereign immunity?
Yes.
Okay, and sovereign immunity for us is 250,000 or 300 or
It's,
what is it? It's
sovereign
changed.
immunity would apply in the case of liability, and it is 200,000
Sorry, guys, couldn't phone.
per person, 300,000 per occurrence, and that would be per claim. So if we had a bus incident where we had 10 people injured, there'd be a maximum of 300,000 available. If a month later we had something else happen where we had multiple claimants or even one severely injured, it would be 300,000.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other questions?
One other question.
Yes, go ahead.
Um,
Mr. Schulman.
We've, both last year and this year, rejected uninsured motorist coverage on the autos. What's the rationale?
Because public transit is not required to carry uninsured motorists or PIP.
Okay, so while not being required, how does that work in the case of an actual incident?
Well, if we were
Save the
to. Uninsured motorist is generally covering the owner of the vehicle. So uninsured motorists who are, in our situation, we have workers' compensation that covered our employee that could potentially be injured in an accident. So uninsured motorists would not really do anything for us. An uninsured motorist is not a coverage that's available to a third party, it's a first party coverage.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? I have a couple of questions real quickly. How many times have we reached a situation where the 100,000 on general liability or the 250,000 on workers' comp has been exceeded?
We have, well, in the last year, it's usually 1 to 2 claims a year, if that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, a while back, we had a bad injury that I was before you to get authority for, and it was the full 300,000 that we were paying. So it's, since I've been here, it's been about 1 a year.
Okay, so to a large extent, I guess we're self-insuring then on those issues. Okay.
We are, but we're hedging our bets that if something bad does
Correct.
happen, we have financial
Okay, and
assistance.
how do other similarly situated transit agencies handle those kinds of issues?
There are other transit agencies that are fully self-insured on the liability side, that they don't have any excess insurance at all.
Mhm.
My conservative nature does not allow me to recommend that, but it is an option.
Okay, all right. So if we, what I'm getting at is if we're paying all the freight, but we're not really getting a lot of insurance, what if we went to a
Well-
lower self-insurance amount and paid some insurance? That would not help us?
Well, that would not be offered.
Mhm.
100,000 is
That's
going to be the
that's
lowest.
the normal?
Mhm.
Okay.
We're going
All
to be
right.
able to get.
Okay. I appreciate the presentation, and I appreciate the technical support.
So do I.
Any other questions? Do I hear a motion?
Approval for the consent.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes unanimously. Thank you very
Yeah.
much. Appreciate it. Okay. Next on our roster is our benchmarking update. Always like to see how we're doing with the other guys.
Yeah. Just a note, just kind of related to benchmarking, as Diane is now both PSTA's risk manager and HART's risk manager, since they're retired, she's helping us benchmark not only risk stuff, but during the hurricane, she gave us all these ideas on how HART handled it, that we generally feel like we did a great job, but there's some things we learned from them as well that we're going to try to employ, hopefully, not with Maria, but hopefully long time in the future when we have our next hurricane from HART. So, as I think most of you know, this is my favorite presentation I like to give about comparing our performance to the other 19 systems that are in our American Bus Benchmarking Group. Thank you to all of the PSTA staff. I invited you to come to the board members. I invited the staff to come to watch this. I gave them two options. They could A, read the 300-page report that has 300 slides and detailed analysis in text, or they could see my abridged Crib Notes version right here and give me input. So I'm very glad that you all at least came.
That's right.
So again, I know that the Finance Committee and the PSTA Board appropriately spends most of its time talking about high-level policy issues and issues looking into the future. And what benchmarking does for us is a little bit different. This helps us focus as an agency on our performance on a very close day-to-day basis. Why I like it so much is it allows our agency to be focused on constant improvement in what we do every day. There are many, many systems out there that are not in benchmarking groups that are very happy just making sure that the buses go out tomorrow just like they went out today, and not really focused on improving their performance. There are always things that we can do better at. There's things that we do great at. I'm going to show those, of course, in the PowerPoint. And there's some areas that we fall behind on, and that is what we try through our budgeting process to focus more resources, if that's what it takes, or launch new initiatives based on where we need to improve. For those of you who've been on the Finance Committee before, I've tried to give this presentation once a year. Once a year we get a report from the ABBG. So again, just a reminder what benchmarking is. I mean, we do compare ourselves all the time to HART because they're very close. That's not necessarily benchmarking in the truest sense of the word. What's great about the American Bus Benchmarking Group is that the 20 systems that are in there all share the data on a continuous basis, and it's not to try to become number 1 out of 20, it is to try to learn from the other agencies. There's an annual meeting every year. It's not true. The last one was in Providence. This one is actually next week. I'll be leaving right after our board meeting ends to go to Dayton, Ohio. It's in one of the 20 cities that, on a rotating basis, hosts it every year. It costs PSTA about $20,000 a year to participate, and that pays for the Imperial College of London, which is really an international sort of guru at these benchmarking groups. They have about 5 or 6 other benchmarking groups. International, the top 10 largest transit systems in the world are in a benchmarking group. It's like the UN, they have interpreters for those meetings because they're from all over the world. We don't have interpreters. It's all in English. It's the American group. They're all in America.
Well, there's some Canadian, aren't there? Oh, no, Vancouver, okay, so I guess that's, all right, I was thinking.
That's America's Vancouver.
Yeah.
It is essentially a suburb of Portland on the Washington side, just over the river there. So the benchmarking group is also great because the data that we all submit and participate in is quote-unquote confidential. Not really confidential. The members of the group are not confidential. That's why I'm showing you this slide. But you'll see on most of my slides that I only show our performance compared to anonymous, the other 19. That's because it doesn't necessarily really matter whether Dayton, Ohio, or Spokane, or Salt Lake City is who they are. It just matters really how we compare. And then what that does prevent is, and this has happened before, say a news report from Rochester, New York, calling up and saying, well, Pinellas, why are you doing something so much better, and the same thing happening. So we own our data. PSTA owns its data, and all that, of course, in Florida is public, and that information is readily available. But we don't own the data for these other 19 systems, and that's how that works. It's great for PSTA to have links, Orlando join, and there are some things that make links a very close peer to PSTA. So when you think of benchmarking, there's really, of course, two sets of data. And since I have been a CEO in multiple transit systems, and I've worked at a number of transit systems right across the country, I know that the things that make us the same as our peer transit agencies are so much more than the things that make us different. Just like any organization, we constantly hear at PSTA, well, this is the way we do things. We couldn't possibly do it the same way that HART does it, because we do it the PSTA way. Well, maybe they might do it better, or maybe some things are different. Some things, though, are different. There is a context to all of our systems. I think this benchmarking group is pretty good for PSTA because, as you see on the ridership basis, we're right basically in the middle of the whole group. Chicago, which is the suburban Chicago system, has the highest ridership. And I think this is Flint, Michigan, has the lowest ridership, but we're pretty much right in the middle. There are some things that are different, of course, from city to city. But again, this affects the data, but it affects it a lot less than you would think. Most of the lessons learned or the issues are all the same. But one thing, obviously, is the context in where your system is. As we all know, Pinellas County is one of the densest county in Florida, and it is we are very dense compared to the other cities. We are the third densest area, which is Pinellas County. But these light blue lines are a little bit different than the dark blue. The dark blue is the sort of governmental designated area that each city is, and the density, say, of Salt Lake City, or Dayton, Ohio, or Pinellas County, which is very high. But some systems, not ours, but other systems, say like HART, only serve a very the densest portion of their designated county or city, the inner city. And so these light blue lines are the density of the actual area that those transit systems serve in their designated area. And you can see ours is very close to the same because we serve all of Pinellas County, so we're pretty much the same. But some of these have light blue lines that go way higher, and that's because they may have, like I know Orlando Lynx is one of those, that they officially are Orange County and Seminole County and Osceola County, but there's large areas of those counties that are rural that they really have no bus service, so then they compute the density of the area they actually do serve, which is pretty much metro at Orlando, and so their number is one of these high blue ones. Other things about just the way your city or your community is set up affect the way we operate, and they do have impacts on some of our performance as a transit system. I can show you this, and this does allow me to show all the different systems. One of the key differences about Pinellas County compared to some systems is the way we're set up and the way our economy is in Pinellas County. We don't have an enormous amount of white-collar workers in a downtown business district. I think downtown St. Petersburg is our largest business district, and I think it only has 20,000 jobs. Rochester, New York, Flint, Michigan, Des Moines, Iowa have much more concentrated downtowns, and their system is set up to have peak rush hour commuter service into a downtown district, much different than the way we're set up. As you know, we have mainly service-oriented jobs spread pretty ubiquitously across the entire Pinellas County. So we're relatively low. This is called the service peak factor. This is how many buses we have out at our maximum time of day versus the fewest number of buses we have at the minimum time of day. Pinellas County, there really is not much of a rush hour in Pinellas County, so PSTA sends its buses out in the morning, and they stay out running all day pretty much. Des Moines, Iowa, where I used to work, that was not the case. We sent all the buses out in the morning. They picked up people out in the suburbs, they brought them into downtown or to the state capitol, and then they parked, and then they went back out at night. There was relatively, there was almost 3 times as many buses in the rush hour out and running as there were during the midday. Here, it's not the case. We're very close to 1. San Bernardino, another suburban area outside of LA, is kind of similar to Pinellas County in that sense. They're right at 1. They pretty much send their buses out, they go around all day, and they come back at night. This is another way of showing that same impact. And this does have an impact on our budget and the way we operate our service. So these are the 24 hours in a day, and this is not the buses, this is the ridership of each of the systems and when they get their ridership. According to the Imperial College guys, every system in the world is like this. The afternoon rush hour is always busier than the morning rush hour in every city. I'm not sure why. But you can see all of the little humps here in the afternoon rush hour are a little bit higher than the morning peak. You can see there are some systems that are very, what they call peaky, where they have lots of ridership in the morning, they tail off, and then they have it in the evening. And ours is pretty flat throughout most of the day, from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. In addition, PSTA's routes are rather long. We're over here. Our local routes are 30-some miles average in length, and we have just a few express routes that are 40 miles, the ones that go over to Tampa. We have some in Pinellas County. But you can see we're relatively high compared to our peers, the length of our routes. All of this creates miles and intense use of our vehicles at PSTA. And this does affect our budget. You can see we're on the high end of the average number of miles that we put on our buses compared to some systems. Like, I know that Flint, Michigan and Des Moines, Iowa are down here at the bottom because their buses are parked all day, or during the middle of the day, and they just send them out during the rush hour. We put a lot more miles on our vehicles than they do, and these more evenly dense, less CBD cities just have to do that. The other thing that the benchmarking group does a great job of and works really hard is to make sure that we're all comparing apples to apples. It's very, very important that when you're comparing your data that you understand you want to try to be as close as possible in every single city measuring the exact same thing. But sometimes that's just not possible. And there's a lot of debate that goes on because, of course, every system believes that they're doing it the right way. And there's no possible way that they could be doing it wrong. We have these great debates. One very important example is on-time performance. On-time performance in the transit is possibly the most important factor, right? The buses come on time. There's lots of different things that are going on with on-time performance, though, across the world. These red lines, these systems don't have a real-time automatic vehicle locator GPS system like we do, like most systems now do. They still do it the old-fashioned way, where they have a human, a supervisor, go down to the end of the line, usually in the downtown transit center, and with a clipboard, and mark when the buses get there. They're always saying they're 95% on time. It's human. They're only checking one of the many time points in the whole system. And I don't know, maybe there's peer pressure too to say that they came in on time. But you see all the red lines are toward the top. The blue lines and more systems are coming online with GPS systems like PSTA has had for a number of years. The blue lines are all systems that have an AVL, a real-time system like we do, where we check, the computer calculates on-time performance at every single time point, 24/7, on all the routes, all the time, to see if if the bus is on time. The light blue lines, including where we are, don't follow the definition exactly as the American Bus Benchmarking Group has agreed to follow it. Although, in our case, we hope to get this up and running, be in compliance starting October 1. We're working with our vendor now. The definition of on time that the group agreed to is that a bus is considered on time if it is on time, exactly, up to 5 minutes late, or specifically up to 4 minutes and 59 seconds late. As a bus rider, it is ubiquitously terrible to have a bus be early. You cannot have a bus be even a second early. It's okay if it's a minute late. It cannot be early. Some systems do round down, and like this guy allows up to 59 seconds or up to a minute early to count as on time. That is horrible. They should not do that. But what we have been doing, what our computer is set up to do here, is to round up on the 5-minute mark. So we actually allow up to 6 minutes, or up to 5 minutes and 59 seconds. So our 81% on-time performance, which looks to be about middle of the pack, is actually a little bit less. Once October 1, once we get the system reconfigured to do 4 minutes and 59 seconds, our number will come down probably to right about, I think right about the average. This guy way down here, I'm not speaking bad about them, but that happens to be Orlando. I'm not sure why. They're not sure why. What they wrote up in the report is that they created a committee to analyze why. They're at 50-some percent.
Brett?
Yeah.
Before you, could you back up? With our GPS system, suppose the bus drives past 5 empty stops before we pick up somebody at the 6th stop, let's say. Is every bus stop on the GPS system so that when we're driving past a bus stop, it's clocked at that time, each one along the way, or is it only when we stop and pick up somebody that it's?
It's a good question. So all 5,000 bus stops in Pinellas County are in the GPS system. And when you go on the app or on our website, the computer estimates when the bus is coming at every stop. That's not what's calculated here. What's calculated here are about 600, I think about 600 time points. Certain bus stops, not all of them, certain bus stops are called time points. So if you look on our schedule, it'll say like Grand Central Station, Park Street Terminal in Clearwater, and then certain major intersections along the way that the schedule says the bus will be here at 6 o'clock. And as long as it's there between 6:00 and 6:04:59, it will be on time and factor into this. But the stops in between, if they have passengers or they don't, those are not, those are estimated by the real-time system that we have, but they're not guaranteed. And they're not factored into the on-time performance. And that's why you'll see sometimes at a time point, the bus, if it's running early, if it is running a little bit early, it has to sit there and wait to leave that stop on time,
Okay.
not early.
All right, and that's the same definition that the benchmarking group
Yeah.
has, is it has designated time point stops along the routes
Yeah.
of every one of these organizations?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you.
There's a lot of debate in the benchmarking group about the end of the line stop. Does it, and that's usually a time point. The end of the line is almost always a time point. Does it really matter? Does anyone get upset if that bus is early to the last stop? I mean, it can't leave early. It has to sit there. But should it be penalized for the rider for it arriving at the last stop on a route early? No, I don't think so. But passengers like that, you know.
Brett?
Yeah.
So, following up on that, so just to understand, from a percentage basis, we're penalized if the bus shows up early to a time stop in the middle of the run.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we
If it
need-
departs early. If it departs early.
Not if it shows up early. So if it shows up if it's supposed to be there at noon and it shows up at 11:58, and it waits till noon to leave, is that still considered on time, or?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
that's on time.
Okay.
What happens though at the end of the line, or like at a downtown transit center, or like a Grand Central, a bus might come in there, say as route whatever 1, and leave as a different route, or become a different route, and so it'll have a new time point. So it'll depart on time, but it arrived early, and in the computer system, the computer will ding those systems. It's not so much of a factor for us because we are spread out, but the cities that have major downtowns and a major downtown transit center, they always argue that they get dinged on that. I'm not sure.
So, Mr. Erders?
You said we have 5,000 stops.
Yeah.
How many of those have pull-off areas from the main road? Would you say?
That's a good question. Not
100 or 1,000, or how many of them?
I would say less than 100.
And
Well,
again, if you could remind me why we don't try to do that more, or what keeps us from doing that more. I'm sure that there's reasons, and you've gone over this, but I just have to hear that again. There's nothing more irritating to a non-rider
Yes.
than to wait for your guys or gals to stop and catch up on time, or, they just sit there, and and you're going, there's nobody getting on or off. So I know that plays out all the time. So what do we, or can we, or?
Number one, it's a built incentive to consider hopping on the bus, so you won't have to wait behind it. Just kidding. Number two, of course, the right-of-way is a constraint, and there is a debate there's been a debate for a long time, because there has to be designed, the pull-off has to be carefully designed, and sometimes it delays the transit system to weave back out into traffic, even can create an unsafe situation. There was unfortunately a case of a pull-off designed on Enterprise Road. Where's, was it on Enterprise? Or the ones that were designed too short?
Oh, Missouri, I think? I don't know.
It was up in Clearwater, and I believe the designers did not check with PSTA, and the pull-off was designed too short for a bus to even fit in there.
So
Put
you
your shoulder
have
down.
that trade-off versus the people zipping around the buses.
Yeah.
Okay.
One more question.
So following up from that, do we know how many of the time points that buses may be waiting are not pull-offs, right?
We could try to estimate that. No, I don't know that. I mean, I know that we have transit centers around the county. Those are all time points. We have other sort of all the malls have a
Because
major stop, a pull-off area. So
I think that's the issue that's coming up is, are these buses staying there and waiting for
Right.
a long period of time in the main
In the main line of
in the
traffic,
main line
no.
of traffic versus just the normal on-off procedure at a non-time point, which would still be acceptable.
right. We try to make sure that the time points are off the main thoroughfare.
Right.
They may not be a full-blown transit center or whatever, but either they go into a mall and that will be a time point or whatever.
Okay.
I think the time point at Countryside Mall, which is on 580, is actually in a lane. But there's 2 more lanes that allow traffic to pass. So it's probably minimal versus if there was just 1 lane or just 2 lanes.
Some of the areas that PSTA is working on and has as a focus area for the upcoming fiscal year, part of our planning efforts, part of the performance goals for our organization that we're putting together now. I'm going to just touch on those. One thing that we are a little bit trending upward, as you can see, this is 8 years of data, and we have a pretty consistent trend upward, is in accidents. Our vehicles are getting in more accidents, so now we are above average in the number of collisions per 100,000 miles. And so that's an initiative, a safety initiative that we're going to be undertaking in the next fiscal year.
Where do those happen mostly, or is there a way you you can categorize these, or are they just all over, and are they pulling out, pulling in, are they at intersections, lights, where are we having most of our?
Intersections, bus stops, people running into the back of us. I mean, this is all accidents to the vehicles.
Do we have it broken down by at fault, not at fault?
We do. We do, the benchmarking does. We even categorize it by the type, if it's a rear end collision or, all the different types of collisions. We have that. Sorry, Diane, or Diane's back there. I mean, our risk management maybe knows, maybe you can do some analysis on claims that's related to it too.
Well, the rear end collisions, then you again counter that with the pulling off and pulling on, what we were just talking about, because that's obviously a safety issue too.
Yeah, it is. Since I've been here, I know some of this trend upward at PSTA in accidents, I know is a way better data collection. I know that for a fact, that when I first got here, we were not categorizing many things according to the benchmarking definition of what is an accident, like mirrors being ripped off the bus because the bus turns, or a truck rips it off or something, that weren't being counted. Some things, but now we are adhering much more to the National Safety Council definition of an accident and the benchmarking definition. So some of the trend, I can say, okay, that's just better data. It's not necessarily skyrocketing. It always has been high, and now we're just collecting the data better. But more recently, I feel like we've been collecting the data pretty well, and we're still seeing an increase, so this needs to be really addressed. Another area that we have always been high, and luckily, it looks like it's taken a sort of a downturn, is in number of injuries to our passengers. I think a lot of this has to do with we have a relatively older population that is riding the bus here in Pinellas County. We have an older population in Pinellas County. We have a large number of people slipping and falling, tripping and falling. It's very important for our operators, and we do a lot of training, and we have tried to ramp up this training to ensure that they do not pull away from the stop before the people are seated. People are constantly falling down on the vehicles. And I know when I ride, most of the drivers are good about it. I try to become physically fit and, balance myself as best, but it is very hard for many of our passengers, and that is the number one liability that we have all the time, is people falling down on the bus. And you can see that we are one of, not the only system, but we are above average in that area. Coming down, though, hopefully that'll be a continuous trend. Our favorite topic, the type of buses we buy. We're pretty much right in range with what everyone else buys. You can see here, the 80% of our buses are diesel, and then we've got 20% that are hybrid. This data is a little bit old, as of 2015. We got two systems, Fort Worth and I can't remember the other one, that are CNG. Those are the two red lines. And then these gray are Dayton, Ohio has trolley buses that run from overhead wires still. So they have a few of those.
So that's the flashpoint in time at 2015. That's the mix.
Yeah. Yeah, and you can see it's fairly consistent across the country. More and more people are going with hybrid vehicles. Not too many electrics there. You can see on our bar there's a teeny little red of a CNG bus, and I was like, where? We don't have a CNG bus. This data must be wrong, but Henry corrected me. The Jolly Trolleys are included in this data, and they have one CNG bus, a trolley, that they fill up at the Clearwater Gas facility.
Hey, Brad, where's Lynx in there? Because I think they're running a lot of CNG.
I think they are one of these growing CNG. As they replace buses, they're going CNG. It's either this one or I think it is this one, because they don't have too many hybrids there.
So you have the data a few years back, so you can see how things are changing and directions that companies are going.
Yeah, yeah. It's a little bit. I mean, so some of these are legal requirements in California, and we have 2 or 3 of the systems are in California. They're prohibited from buying a diesel bus in California. So they've gone. Every system has gone either CNG, and a lot of them are going with these. And now they have new mandates that they have to buy a certain number of electrics or something. So that's why you see most of the electric buses being purchased in California.
Yeah. Commissioner Johnson?
The question is, we're looking at 2015 numbers here. Conceivably, we have 2016, or is there a delay in?
We do. And next week when I go to the Dayton, they will reveal the 2016 data that they've been collecting.
Okay.
And then we'll submit our 2017 data in the next couple of months to be tabulated and then put together in a report that usually comes out. The final report comes out in like February of every year. They do a draft at the meeting in the fall. But yeah, our percentage, I think, has grown of hybrids has grown to about a third of our fleet as of now. We also talk about this in the CIP about increasing the number of bus shelters in our system. PSTA does very well with benches. We have almost 30% of all of our 5,000 stops have a bench. We're getting better, but we're not, we're doing okay on the shelters. That's the light blue line. But in Florida, clearly is a little bit different. Orlando Lynx, as I know, is up here too. We need shelters on our system, maybe more than some other systems need it. And this is where the good stuff happens, or the stuff that we do really well, is on the financial aspects. First is our fares. Our fares are high. We're way up here. At $225, we are outpacing our peers for the amount that we charge our customer. That's our base fare that more and more, it seems like very few people are actually paying. Because then you look at this chart, which is the actual revenue per boarding. How much are we actually getting in money for every rider that boards? As you know, a growing percentage of our riders are using a transportation disadvantage bus pass that they're paying $11. Either they are or the county is partly paying $11 a month to ride. Some people are St. Pete College students that are being paid for by St. Pete College, so we're getting different revenues for that. We overall are just receiving about $1 per customer, just over $1 per customer. And then you can see we come down. So even though we have a base fare that we publish as $2.25, we're actually only getting $1. We could just charge $1 and have no TD program and no special programs with the universities and stuff and get the same amount of money. But we're not different than most of the other systems. Most of the other systems charge a fare and then they have different programs, whatever policies that their board or their community sets to give discounts. And you can see that our dollar per revenue is more in line with the other parties. The only thing that PSTA is number one in the whole 300 pages is our cost, is how much we invest in public transportation. We are the lowest cost, most efficient system in one of the most I know in the United States this is per vehicle mile. We're also lowest in per vehicle hour, but just above $6 per mile overall cost PSTA to operate a mile of bus service. If we were, I don't know who this is, out in California or someplace, we would only be able to provide, and we're up at $12, we'd only be able to provide half the amount of service that we actually provide with the amount of money that we have. So we're very proud of that. And as you can see, we've maintained that for a number of years. You can see that the last 8 years, we have not really, this is adjusted for inflation, but our cost per mile has stayed relatively flat for a long time.
Bill, do you need to go back to slide 3? Here's the same question.
Well, it applies here too.
Okay.
Is this operating cost include the driver, includes the fuel costs, it includes the maintenance cost for the bus? What
It includes
costs?
everything. It includes all operating expenses. It includes administrative costs on top of those things that you just mentioned, yeah.
Thank you.
Is that capital as well, Brian?
It does, this chart does include capital. We have a relatively low capital budget compared to our peers. What they do here is, since systems sometimes have one really big year, if they build a major transit center or something, they take a 5-year average of your CIP and they blend it into this. See, 5-year average investment costs using available data. So the last 5 years are averaged for PSTA and put into this number as well.
The next slide is just operating.
The next slide is just operating, right? So it's less than $6. And so why is PSTA one of the lowest cost systems? There's a number of reasons. One is we have a very efficient network. And the network is defined as the way your route structure is set up. Do you have a lot of wasted time in your schedule? Wasted time would be if the buses are sitting there out at Countryside Mall or at a spot, or we're paying for perhaps the fuel unless it's shut off. We're paying for the driver to just sit there. That's the dark blue. Or if you're spending a lot of time, quote unquote, deadheading the buses, sending the buses from the garage with no passengers on them to the first stop on the route where they open the door for passengers. That's called deadhead. And this takes into consideration both those, and PSTA does a great job on that. Hats off to Christine and Raj back there, our scheduling department right now. They're trying to hire one more. But this is what they do. They factor in and make sure that they can try to integrate all the different routes and the driver work periods to make the most efficient system possible. You compare to some of the highest ones where a third of their whole pay for their drivers is not in service, that certainly helps our costs. The one factor that we look at a lot is, well, systems can save money by just taking it out on their employees, paying their employees less or giving them less benefits. And that doesn't seem to be the case at PSTA. We are efficient and low cost, and we compensate our employees. I know not many people back there are thinking that right now, because right now it's valuation time, but we do very well compared to our peers. This chart kind of shows that in terms of what the benchmarking group calls absenteeism. When an employee is absent at a transit agency, they fall into 4 categories: paid and unplanned, unpaid and unplanned, paid and planned, paid total. Those 3 categories. Paid and planned is vacation. We're paying you and we know that you're going to be absent because you signed up to be on vacation. Paid and unplanned is generally sick time, or we didn't know. Especially if you're a bus driver, it's very important that we know when you're not going to be here. The vacation schedule for our bus drivers is set almost a year in advance. The drivers, based on seniority, tell us bid on when they can take vacation, and we know that, and we schedule that very carefully. Sick costs us a lot more because they don't show up, and we have extra drivers on duty to fill in their runs. And the worst is, paid and unplanned is worse than paid and planned, of course. Unpaid, unplanned, not so bad. They didn't come, but we're not paying them. We're not paying them. That's not as bad, necessarily not as costly. And you can see PSTA is relatively high. We're above average in total, largely led by our vacation. Our vacation benefits, our paid and planned leave opportunities for employees are above average. And I know our driver wage, is certainly very competitive in the Southeast. Our operating costs are in line, very in line when you look at it by department or by function. The driver cost of PSTA is around 40% of our overall cost, which is very close in line with the average there. Where we have a very low cost is in the maintenance area. This, as you can see, there's much larger gray lines here than PSTA has, and then the little red line is the service, is part of our maintenance department, but are not mechanics. They are the people that fuel and clean the buses, and that is very low. And then the very top, this black line, the black bars across the top are the administrative costs, or the overhead that we want to try to keep in line and not get out of whack. And that is all of the administrative employees of PSTA, and that is, I think I counted, I think we're a little bit above, below average. I think we're, out of the 20, I think we were like 8, the 8th smallest black line on there. This is sort of the same thing in the number of drivers that we have. I mean, number of employees that we have is right in the mix. We have, and this is in terms of by number of hours worked. This is the number of drivers. Maintenance is very low compared to our peers, and administrative and other staff is about right in line with the average.
Right, question, could you go back to the previous slide just for a second? So just, I'm just trying to think about this, if, you know, when you have charities that are out there and they talk about like 95% of the
Yeah.
monies go to the basic core service and 5% is a kind of overhead number versus the other way, 90, you know, which would be
Right,
horrible.
which would be bad.
It sounds like that most of our costs, in our case, are being driven towards either maintenance or the driver cost. I mean, it sounds like we're doing a pretty good job of not overloading our system with administrative costs.
Right, if you pull up to the top of the gray here at 80,
Yeah.
about 84, 85%, yeah, that would be, I don't know exactly how those charities
Yeah, I understand.
do that calculation, but
Yeah, I understand.
similarly, yeah.
We're trying to drive more towards our basic service and not be too much overhead.
Yeah.
It can really hurt a system.
Put the investment out on the roads of Pinellas County rather than
For our customers.
for our customers,
Yes.
yeah.
Thank you.
One chart that I know that is in the report that I didn't put in here, I don't think, but they compute how many hours of bus driver do you have to pay to get 1 hour of bus service on the road. Of course, every hour that a bus is driving is 1 hour of bus driver pay, because every bus, until we get autonomous buses, need a driver. But then the number is always higher than that because there's people on vacation, there's deadhead, shift change, etc. And we're very efficient in that way as well. And then, of course, one area that we do really well, and we're getting even better, and we're going to see our numbers spike even higher. Henry has shown me, we've been talking about this at the board level, is our maintenance. Even though we are have a smaller maintenance staff than our peers and our lower cost, our miles between road calls, or in British terms, mean distance between technical faults, has been steadily increasing and is above average. And then Henry just showed me that we're currently trending off this chart, 23,000 miles this fiscal year.
Tremendous.
Yeah, so really very good. I'm getting toward the end, don't worry. I wanted to show this to the Finance Committee. This is kind of an interesting policy position, and Debbie talked about it a little bit in her budget presentation. This is a chart showing where the money comes from to support the transit system in all the 20 cities. With the dark blue here being local government, that's our property tax. Property tax here. Some are sales tax, some are all different types of revenue. Local government. Light blue is state government, and red is federal government. For operating expense, we've had a discussion at the Finance Committee, and Debbie presented it, that PSTA receives a formula allotment of about $13 million a year in federal funds that we can use for capital, or we can use for certain kinds of operating. And it's all over. It's always the case that we have major capital needs. We obviously need to keep replacing the buses. We really would not like to have to spend it on the operating, or we would not like to increase its use for operating expenditures. I know across the bay over at Hart, they got into that situation where they were using like 70-some% of it for operating, and that they're trying to scale that back now to try to be more sustainable.
Hey, Brad?
And we've had questions at the PSTA board about whether could we do away, could we put all of our federal money in to capital and not have any. When I see this chart and see that, it's kind of like, I don't know, it's a bad drug or something, everybody's doing it, it's not a good excuse, but everybody, all the systems do use some of their federal funds, and ours is relatively, right in line. This red bar is using those federal funds to support some small level of operations.
Commissioner Smith?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So fares are not included in that, that's just basically just.
Fares, advertising revenue, and other kinds of revenue are not included. These are this government-type support. You can see this, there's a number of states that fund a lot of the whole system, and the local government effort is fairly low. Florida is better than Ohio, which has nothing. Dayton, Ohio is federal and local 100%.
Where's Lynx in that mix, Stephen?
Must be Lynx is also at the same state. I think this one's
Very
Lynx.
similar.
Yeah, it's similar to us.
Is there,
Mr. Schulman?
thank you, is there a sense as to how much of the government support across all the levels is the total support, right? So taking into account that we have revenue coming from other
Yeah.
sources, right? Because one of these numbers could be, they only get $1 million total, just making up numbers, and it's broken up this way versus another system gets $100 million total, and it's broken up in a certain way. I mean, so is there any sense as to what proportion of each of these is of the actual total revenue sources for
Yes.
those different?
Um,
And where do we fall in that regard?
Well, and I think you can get to it by sort of a backwards way by seeing that, where is it? Here. No, here. Most of the systems are collecting really about an average of $1 per customer per fares. So it's very consistent. And I think there is a chart that is speaking exactly to say what level of subsidy are you getting for your overall revenue. And and we're right in line with that. And because the other side of it is mostly fares. There are a few systems that get large chunks of funds, say from the school district. They provide school transportation in a large way. But by and large, it's either fares or some kind of governmental subsidy, either state or local. And you can see there's nobody that's really out of the major range in how much fare they're collecting, total fare they're collecting. So the subsidies are on the rest of the 100% are about the same total subsidy level, about 80%. Where is it? Okay. Oh, last but not least. So there's a lot. It is overwhelming, the amount of data that is collected, and it's very, very important not to get overwhelmed by it, but use this data to really show. It has to show improvement in your organization. It's designed to focus your attention on areas where you need to invest in or to focus your attention on to get better. So at the very end of the report, they try to summarize their 300 pages into a chart, one chart for each system. And they've picked out 15 key factors, key performance indicators that kind of touch upon all the different parts of your organization and how you stand. Of course, some factors that make you the best performer have an impact to make you maybe the worst performer in another factor. They counterbalance themselves. There's no possible way that you could be the best performer in every one of the factors. We would be much more efficient if we didn't pick up any passengers. We'd save money. And the drivers are always suggesting that. You can see, of course, that we are one of the better performers in these cost ones. PSTA and Lynx are always the worst in our fuel economy. because we run the air conditioners the most. But Lynx and our, we're definitely challenged in that. But this is I think a nice summary way to evaluate our overall performance, and so this is what we have tied now to our new performance scorecard. We have as one of the PSTA performance metrics on our agency performance scorecard to make improvements using this benchmarking data. And at least the goal that we're thinking about setting up for the organization is we have to improve our performance on half of these over the coming year. It's not necessary that we have to get above median. That would be nice, but we have to be focused on these areas, especially the areas that are below median. These, 8 areas, and see improvement. See the bar go a little bit, get a little bit better. That's the goal. That's really the whole goal of the whole performance metric, performance scorecard system, is to focus our attention of our organization so we all know what we're trying to do and to see improved performance. And I think the benchmarking group does a really good job of helping us get that focus.
Quick question. And the group that we're a part of, is that decided, who decides that group of, I guess we have 20
Yeah.
in our group? Who decides that group? And do you have any criticisms of the group that we're a part of, or any, good thoughts of, just a comment on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So PSTA was one of the inaugural members of the group, and it's just basically so far been those volunteer or people interested have signed up. And it has grown from, I think it started at 6 to 20. And there's a number of systems that are want to join and increase that number. What the folks from Imperial College have said is that the group has gotten too big. They want to ensure that the system, that the benchmarking group is of a manageable size to ensure that dialogue and good feedback and the people get to know each other and trust each other, so they're not giving these presentations to a large group with microphones and, because the value of this is learning from each other on how to do things better. How if Salt Lake City is doing something, I need to know that guy and call him up. His name is Brad, so I do know him, and pick his brain on how we can do things better. So maybe they've already even voted to do this, or we're going to vote in Dayton officially to do it, is to split the group in half.
This group that we have.
Is to partially split the group in half. That the current 20 will be split 10 and 10, the largest 10 in one group and the lower 10 in the other group. The report will always be combined. Oh, and then the system, the groups will be allowed to grow. Right now, they're not letting anyone else in at 20. They're going to cut it back to 10 and 10, and then allow each group to grow up to 15. And so the report will still show all 30 systems, and you'll see all the information will still be combined. But what that does is, for the annual meeting mainly, the annual meeting makes the group more manageable.
But you had talked in the beginning that there's another group that does international, and I'm assuming that there are some that have big cities that are included together.
Yeah.
The larger metropolitan areas, that they're separated out. This is just a group that's more alike.
Yeah, I would say medium-sized systems. Cleveland, there's some larger systems in there. Cleveland, Ohio, Salt Lake City, down to Flint, Michigan, I think our smallest. But it's a good mix. 100 to 500 buses is about what we're at. There is there's an international bus benchmarking group that has about 15, which is sort of the largest systems, and I think that has a couple of United States systems in there, and then the 10, they have one that is the 10 largest systems. So London, Paris, New York City, Tokyo.
It wouldn't make any sense for us to be a part of that group.
No.
It sounds like
No.
this is a pretty good group
Yeah.
to do this benchmark. I mean, if you're gonna do it, you might as well be relevant to.
Right. I mean, that's why I showed that it's
Yeah.
pretty good for us because we're right in the middle in terms of ridership and the number of buses and stuff. We're kind of like right in the heart of it in this group. So I think there'll be a little bit of a problem for PSTA once it splits in half for the meetings, because I'm not sure we're going to be either the smallest in the bigger group or the biggest in the smaller group, but the report will all be, it'll still be basically the same. It'll just make the meetings go more efficiently, I think.
In this chart, it looks like a chart that might be good to share with some other people, just to show us what we're doing. You explained the diesel fuel effectiveness where we are. Is the fare revenue per passenger mile, is there something unique about us, or is that an area where we think we can get improvement? Is it because we don't drive very many miles, or why are we?
Passenger miles, this is a factor of passenger miles,
Right.
which is a passenger on a bus going 1 mile. So if 10 people are on the bus and it goes a mile, that's 10 passenger miles. We are below average in the number of overall riders. We're almost average, but we're slightly below average of the group in our passenger miles per mile of bus service. The number of people that are riding for every mile that the buses run is a little bit below average. I think that's what's driving that number. In addition,
So our passenger gets on and doesn't ride as far as a typical passenger in a
commuter-oriented
that's
system.
Computer.
Commuter-oriented systems do rack up a lot of passenger miles compared to a system like ours where people are going shorter distances. That average fare revenue of $1 is a little below average, and I think that's what's also factoring into that. Our transportation disadvantage program, as you see from the ridership statistics, and almost every system in here, I think every system in here has seen a ridership decline over the last couple of years. Most of them much more than we have. But as we've been talking, our transportation disadvantage ridership is not declining. It's growing. And our UPass ridership is flat. So the ridership that's declining are the ones that are paying the full fare. So we're not seeing an increase in that average revenue per customer, unfortunately. And that's hurting our metric here. But we are making investments and focusing on driver training. Of course, as I mentioned, the accidents and injuries and on-time performance is showing we're a little bit below. But again, some of that's factoring in some of those systems that are using manual checks and things like that. But it's certainly an area that we're focused on improving.
Commissioner Scott?
Thank you. Brad, could you explain seat utilization and capacity utilization?
Yeah. This is an area I think that we don't do a very good job of. This is kind of a data collection challenge for us. Seat utilization is, they actually calculate how many seats are in your fleet, and then based on ridership data, the average using of the seats.
That were full?
Right. If you're full, if every seat is full, that's 100%. And PSTA, I think, is a little bit below average. The overall average is like 20%. 20% of all seats, 365, are full. And what the benchmarking guys say is that is it's only a little, people say in America, people don't ride public transit as much in Europe and other places, but they say that the average seat utilization in Europe is only like 25 or a little bit higher than, and all of their North American are right around in the 20s range. Anyway, that's what that is. And then capacity utilization is, I don't think we should take credit for being above average on that. There are most of the other systems identify the capacity of a bus to be greater than the number of seats to allow for standees. That the bus is capable of packing in, like the bus that Joe and I rode on that one time to do the video. So says the king. All of the standees plus the seated people. PSTA has never identified a capacity for our buses. Our capacity is the seats. We don't calculate or allow for any standees. We do allow for standees, we just don't calculate it.
Right.
And I would like to change that. I think we should change that to allow for standees and have a factor.
Because if you have standees, your seat utilization theoretically is 100%.
Yeah, that's why, right, that's why we're down here, but in the capacity, we're showing, we're above average,
Yeah.
above the median, but that's just based on our own definition. And I think, if we're doing it in kind of a weird way, I think there's others that are doing it similarly. Some show that the bus capacity is double what the seated capacity is, and some are like us that don't show any difference. So this is an area that needs a lot of work across, and including PSTA.
Thank you.
Again, this is hopefully interesting, if not helpful information. I think it's really very important for our organization to stay involved with this, to keep tracking, to work on improving what we do every day. That's why I love it. But it's just an opportunity for the Finance Committee to kind of get a better feel for what we're doing here.
Any other questions?
Are we going to go over the other?
No, I wasn't going to. I mean, because I actually presented to the Finance Committee that data. I did not update it with any new data, so I don't have it in here. But I included in your packet some data I put together last year, more on some of the financial data comparing. I think it's mostly Florida systems. The other data I just collected myself, that wasn't part of the benchmarking group, and some of the, there's some other data in your presentation that's in the Granicus system. Did you have a question on that?
I just was kind of puzzled by it, and so I didn't know whether you were going to.
We can certainly talk about
I
it.
was just wondering, what does this say? And I couldn't come up with something that
It's
was
old, that's right. Yeah.
was relative. So
That was just trying to get a sense in Florida of the same thing I just presented. What percentage of their federal funds that they get are they taking out of their capital program and putting into their operating program? The goal would be to have a low percentage.
Yeah, the main thing here is HART is very high compared to us.
Right, and that's what I was trying to say. They're trying to clean that back. They have more money for capital.
Any other questions? I have one question. If we look at our average revenue is around $1.
Yeah.
And our cost per mile is around $6. So that means $5 is coming from external funding, and that's the figures that we saw that had to do with how much from local government, how much from state government, and how much federal government.
There's a little bit of advertising, a small of advertising revenue in there too.
Yeah. We hope to get more. I see more buses with
Morgan & Morgan.
labels on the side.
Law firms.
Okay.
I
All
think
right.
that contributes to our.
Accidents.
Yeah, right, right. Okay,
Yeah.
well, thank you very much, appreciate it.
Thank you.
It's good. And I think everybody agrees that the benchmarking group participation is really beneficial in terms of giving us a database that we can compare and see what else in the way of innovation and improvement and so on other companies around the country are doing that we can piggyback off of.
One final
Yes.
question.
Sure.
And as we talked a little bit about the DART trips being way up, and you said the UPass seemed to be holding its own, but it really seems like we've dropped considerably on UPass. I was just wondering, I think it's fiscal year to date. this
Oh,
information.
yes, well,
Um,
this month of August is an anomaly for the UPass because, as you recall, last
Last
August
year.
2016, we had a little hiccup issue with the Pinellas County Health Department passing out the blue cards. Those were being factored just for the month, no. Just for the month of July and August of 2016, we were counting those blue cards as a UPass. They were not UPass, but they were being, that 180,000 is an anomaly. That, when you, and I do have a chart that when you trend out the UPass month over month, it was in the 50,000s, and then it, for like July and August, it went to the 100 and something, and then went back, it's back to 50. Yeah.
So we're still having a little bit of decrease, but not like this. This seemingly would be a
That would be an
little
enormous,
alarming.
right.
Yeah.
Now we have basically taken those Pinellas County Health Department clients that have the blue card and appropriately shifted those to be counted as transportation disadvantage. So about 130, that's what most of the big increase in TD passes you see
Got it.
there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, all right, so moving along, then, monthly financials, Debbie.
Thank you very much. And before I start that, I just wanted to make a little announcement. Michael Hansen has received his certified, I want to make sure I get this right, certified public finance officer designation. So
Cool.
he has
Great.
now, it's quite an accomplishment. I told him he's got to lay low because we're going to have to do more cards that are longer. They'll cost more money, not allowed.
Right, we'll see that budget item next month, right?
Right, office supplies way up, it's new cards. But we're looking at the month of July, and in July, we were just about within 1% of target on budget, with a positive variance of 38,600. Of note, under revenues, we saw passenger fares were down significantly, about 205,000. As you recall, in June, we had a half-price sale, which went very well. As a matter of fact, we sold, normally we'd sell on the average around 350, 360 monthly passes. We sold 3,315 passes
Whoa.
in the month of June. So I'm sure there's quite a few people who bought 2 passes, one for July as well. But the positive news is when we take a look at August, we're seeing an overall increase in the ridership numbers and in the sale of the 31-day passes, which tells me by offering this, we've gained some new riders into the system.
Mm-hmm.
And that's important, not just repeat riders, but I think new riders coming in. As you can also see on here for the month of July, our expenses were also under budget, more so than the revenues were under budget, so that was good news. If we take a look at the year-to-date, we are at $9.1 million surplus as compared to $8.6 million budgeted, $520,000 positive variance. Again, our expenses are coming in under budget, more so than the fare revenues are down. And last 2 months, we've seen an uptick, or at least for August, we did in June as well. So I think we're starting to turn a corner, although a couple months is not a trend. So I think we'll be targeting pretty close to budget by the end of the year.
Okay, good. Comments, questions? Okay. And ridership, right?
Is that your places?
Mhm.
Overall, August ridership was slightly down, but trending, as Debbie said, in a slightly better way to be less down than it has been. Still working on refining that report, so it's not on here, that Commissioner Eggers, you were talking about, we were talking about last time, about sort of trying to give a sense of what's driving the trend. And we think we have some better ideas on how to present that in a more easy to understand way, so stay tuned for that. Then you can see also just excellent work by our maintenance department on the miles between road calls, and some improvements to our total accidents. An area we've been, well, for the month, but you can see still overall we're increased slightly for the year. Got any answer your questions on that?
Question? Oh, sorry. Commissioner Johnson.
Not so much a question, but a couple of comments. In the accidents, it's interesting to note that the preventable is getting better, right? The accidents in total are kind of flat, so we're making progress in preventable accidents. Am I reading that right?
Actually, you can see where we're getting worse.
Oh.
Total accidents.
It's confusing on here because I don't know whether it's good or thumbs up or thumbs down.
Prior year versus
So-
Total accidents are down 1% from a year ago. And that's the number that I really factor, because that calculates everything. People hit us, we hit them, whatever. Preventable is subjective in some sense. We're like I kind of implied, it's up 37%. Now, some of that is that we are being much more rigorous in our defining of accidents as preventable, trying to follow the exact definition of what is a preventable accident by the National Safety Council, much more to a T. Of course, we have a whole system in place with an accident review committee and an appeals process. Drivers that have a preventable accident, in some cases, face discipline, and so they have an appeals process they go through. But we're doing a much more rigorous job of collecting that. So some of that increase is just our own efforts in collecting that. But it is an area of focus, as I mentioned.
The other thing that I wanted to ask about, there's little footnotes in here, but we don't see what the footnotes say. For instance, total passenger trips, that includes the TD passenger trips, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, and then finally, the other bus passenger trips, that includes the CMA trips out on the trolley.
It includes all the Jolly Trolley services and Looper.
And I would report that they are phasing out the winter experience at the downtown Clearwater. I think they're now only opening that on weekends, so that number of those trips where you have to go back and forth will be going down further. Yeah. And to be consistent, we might try to look at, of the other bus passenger trips, how much of that is related to CMA versus the others, where we're really trying to look at history comparison. And
Yeah.
I'm still struggling with the negative change or the declining change in bus passengers over a period of time. Yes, the economy was bad and more people were taking the bus because they couldn't afford, didn't have the revenue for a car. But we're now comparing year to year. Last year at this time, the economy was about the same as this year, but we're still seeing a decrease in ridership. And I'm wondering, what, you say that that's the same trend nationally, but still, what would we have to do to change that trend? We're here to support our citizens, and if our citizens aren't using the system as much, it gets to the question that some people bring up about, well, are we serving all of our social needs appropriately? That we're missing some of the people that really need the service that we're not giving to? Or are we, or do we have our routes in the most effective places? So we get, the routes that we have are those that attract more riders, and we need to shift our resources to those routes that would build ridership rather than continuing some of the routes that have low performance. And of course that's difficult for the board to cut routes that have low performance, but yet I think we have to kind of put our arms around that and make some of those tough decisions.
I think you've just given an excellent commercial for the upcoming presentation that Cassandra's working on for next month's planning committee.
Oh, well, wonderful.
Now looking at our routes again.
Yeah, I would say that, the alternative to that is that we need to look at ways to market our bus ridership to larger employers or other people using something similar to a UPAS type system where we're giving employers an opportunity to enhance benefits to their employees by partially subsidizing using public transportation to get to and from their jobs. And so that's an alternative to that. It was on Facebook yesterday. Amazon is looking for a second headquarters, and we're right off the bat out of the loop for that because we don't have sufficient public transportation to be able to accommodate that kind of an employer. Because that's one of the criteria that they are using to determine where they want to put that. So we need to be looking at it from the other perspective of not getting smaller, but figuring out a way to get more efficient and get more ridership so that we can enhance our services in order to attract the kind of big name employers where we have busloads of folks going from home to job and job to home, that kind of thing.
I heard the same report and thought the same thing. We have an economic contribution to make to the region through public transit, and we have some opportunities in that area.
Well, I'd say to that, if we're doing better with U passes and our full fare passes, you start driving, more demand for our system and more demand for our buses, and then it kind of feeds off of each other. But when you see the numbers, and I don't know what the numbers are for people that pay full fare and how they do from year to year, or our U pass system, which obviously is a little bit out of whack here because of what you said.
Yeah.
Too, but still not climbing. We're not, that part's not. And those are the two areas that you would think that would be an indicator that we're reaching out to,
Yeah, well, we're
a
trying.
different mix, if you will, of rider.
That's exactly right. I mean, when you look at the ridership, we don't really have any. I think we can probably get there, but we haven't done it yet. how many, the number of riders and a trend of paying full fare, paying either full price for the bus passes that they buy or cash, full price, is where we're losing the riders. Because I see the TD is increasing every single month. That's not going down, and that's now over a third of our total ridership is transportation disadvantage. And the UPass, well, you're right, is not climbing, because we really haven't added any major, we pretty much have the same groups that are in the UPass. St. Pete College, like 90-some%, and the attendance at St. Pete College is slightly declined over the last couple of years. We're trying very hard to get more corporate businesses, maybe hopefully some hotels to sign on to that. But so you look at it, so the group that's leading the drop in ridership is our, cash and full price paying passengers. Which are obviously the more discretionary riders that were riding when gas prices were higher and when the economy was worse, and some other factors a couple of years ago that have left us.
And that article that you talked about with Amazon, does it give indications of what would be required to be considered? I mean, how far away are we? Are we close? Are we
No,
far away?
I don't think that, but they had a series of criteria. I don't remember all of them, but the one
That would be
that
interesting.
jumped out at me, of course, was transportation. And, our transportation network just isn't adequate right now to be able to accommodate that. And I'm factoring in not only us, but HART and possibly some of the other bus systems locally as well. But, compared to...
It's hard to afford the build it, they will come mentality.
Yeah.
If they don't come, you
Yeah.
just drown.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a catch-22, which comes first, but...
So tell them we're nimble and we're flexible and we can meet create a system that fits their needs.
Yeah.
Ramp up.
Ramp up. So.
Yeah.
Well, to an extent, land use patterns
Mhm.
affect the ability to have an efficient transit system. And the Charlotte with a strong downtown core,
Mhm.
major employees in the downtown core. We have, St. Petersburg probably has a lot of jobs in their core, but yet we probably have more jobs spread out in the gateway area than there are in downtown St. Petersburg. But because it's so spread, it's not as efficient for pooling transportation, which gets to the job that I'm trying to do for you on the MPO, in how do we optimize both the transit system and the land use system? There's a lot of potential there.
Building a lot of apartments along US 19 in Clearwater, that does part of it. So you guys are doing your part.
But on the other hand, the accessibility from those apartments to get across
Yeah.
is
It's a whole nother
is
issue.
the side of that.
Okay. Any other comments or questions?
One
Yes.
question.
Yes. Commissioner Scott.
I like, when we did that half-price promotion, that was really effective. I think we should look at doing more of that, because we can target that, we can go into higher employment areas and we can target those things and see if it's effective, I think we should, because that's something we can do quickly and easily and see results pretty quickly from. So, I think that was a great thing. We should do more of it.
I do too. I'm just trying to convince Debbie that it was a great thing. I haven't gotten there fully.
But I mean, you
I
can
think
go
generate more money for us.
and test it with certain employers or certain areas and kind of, geographically try it and just sort of see what sort of penetration we get. I mean, that could be a test for like maybe a future UPass program or an expansion of that.
All right, good discussion, guys. Any other topics that we need to cover, future topics?
Just wanted to quickly highlight, you probably saw some notice that we were the recipients of a no bus
Yes.
grant from the federal government that I did my first ever Facebook Live event with Congressman Christ. He was appropriately focused on hurricane things, as we all are, and so we could do a Facebook Live, but it actually was picked up by a number of reporters saw it and wrote a little piece about it. We were one of 5 systems. Thank you to whoever gave me the full list. This is the full list of, you can look at it, of cities that got grants, but the FTA decided, I guess, to spread it evenly out. There's $55 million was available nationwide, and they gave out 51 grants. The maximum one, I think, was like 1.5 million, and the minimum was, we got $1 million. They basically gave a whole bunch of $1 million grants out, which can afford us 1 or 2 electric buses. There's 5 systems in Florida. All 5 got $1 million each. PSTA, Gainesville, Jacksonville, Tallahassee, and Fort Lauderdale each got $1 million grants.
Okay.
Those are good.
Good. All right. Okay, so our next meeting is October 18th, and we have a meeting this afternoon at 6 o'clock. Huh?
Yes, we do. See you all back here.
All right, see you back
Won't
then.
stay here.
Thank you, everyone. Meeting's adjourned.
Okay.
Neil, Brad, that's an invited invitation there.
Yes.
What do we anticipate time?
The last one was 20, and I'm going to suggest that Debbie not do her presentation.